But Formula One does need to hold on to some of its heritage, you know, particularly with some of the old circuits and stuff like that. You know, it would be a shame, as much as every modern fan hates Monaco.
Yep.
For me, as a historic fan, you know, it's got to be there.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Track Limits podcast presented by Formula Addict. I'm your host, Swish. I'm with my co-host, Henny. Today we have a very, very special guest, probably one of the most recognizable journalists in the motorsport world, Craig Scarborough. Welcome to the show.
Welcome.
Thank you for inviting me and for that build-up.
Yeah. You were like, who is that?
Yeah, they're like,
Amazing. Well, Craig, how are you doing? How's the off-season been so far? Yeah. Is it being a kind of a time for you to chill a little bit, or are you still?
Do you even have an off-season?
Yeah, do you even have an off-season yet?
There is a bit of an off-season. Actually, the season ended a little bit early last year, didn't it? The year before, it went into December, and suddenly, you know, you were through Christmas, and we were getting ready for New Year. So I've had a bit of downtime.
Nice.
But, you know, this year so far, I was building up, talking about the new regulations, about the problems people were having last year, and, you know, just kind of get myself up to speed. But I always keep myself busy. So
we love it.
All right. Well, over the next hour, I'm very excited about this episode because you know obviously so much about not just the sport, but I think, like you mentioned, some of the new technical directives and how that's going to have an impact on the sport. And we have a lot of people, even some newer fans of the sport, that might be really curious to dive a little bit deeper there. So we break our podcast up into 3 sections. Q1, all about racing related. Q2, more kind of around you as a professional, how you got to where you are. And then Q3, the rapid fire round. You ready?
For the first 2, yes.
Perfect. All right, well, let's get into Q1. Tell us a little bit, kind of around 30 seconds, 45 seconds. This might be tough for you, but tell us a bit about your career and some of the kind of core accomplishments you're proud about.
So, I mean, my career in terms of journalism in motorsport is that I just cover the technical side of the sport. I don't really care about the drivers and the politics and the sponsors and all of that. You know, that's always a part of it. So my niche has always been to talk and draw and write about the technical side of the sport. I've done that now for 23 years, really, as a journalist. And every year, you know, something changes. I get a little bit more deeper involved in my understanding or the way that I can communicate things. And today I'm doing work with Formula One itself, with their tech show, Tech Talk, along with a number of other magazines, YouTube channels. And, you know, I'm very busy on social media because I just love going on and on.
I love your Twitter feed. It is a joy.
And then what does the day-to-day life for Craig then look like? Like, tell us a bit about being a tech journalist. Like, what does that actually look like in Formula One?
Well, it's not a job for me.
Yeah.
You know, this is what I would do if I didn't have a job.
Right.
You know, if I was unemployed, I would be doing exactly what I do now.
Yeah.
Because at the base of it, I'm an F1 fan.
Yeah.
But I'm a family man, so I have a school run. Still just about finishing doing that now. Luckily, my children are all grown up.
Yeah.
Day starts with coffee. Throughout the day, coffee is about my only vice that I have, really. And it's a mix. You know, I've got, you know, family life and normal life. I've got other interests, which tends to be cars and motorbikes and restoration and things like that.
Right.
But a lot of the day is spent, you know, on social media, researching, doodling and drawing. You know, I've got a real passion and interest for collecting parts of F1 cars. If you ever see my Twitter feed, you see I've always got something on my workbench, and you know, I bought some bits and pieces last week. So I'm always sort of scanning around trying to find stuff like that. Particularly pedals. I've got a strange collection of F1 pedals.
Really? Like throughout the years, during the eras? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I've got pedals going back to the late 80s.
Wow. How do you even collect that?
Yeah, where do you get them from?
It's hard to find them. I've probably got about 30 or 40 at the moment.
Wow.
So so my time really is spent, you know, either on the computer, on my phone, and just keeping my eye out for things.
Nice. And then broadcast, I think web as well, print as well. I mean, you've been involved as a journalist across so many different mediums. Which area is the most exciting for you, in your opinion?
Well, I think, you know, through my career, I started out with someone's website, which was, you know, kind of the old HTML coded, very simple, techf1.com.
Nice.
A guy in Australia set that up, and I sent him some drawings, some writing, and that was great fun. And then it got into paid websites, magazines. Social media is probably the one thing that's really kind of grown my interest, although it's kind of like the giveaway in terms of my career. But I really enjoy that. But to be honest, doing live TV is probably the greatest fun. Actually, being at a circuit, being in the pit lane, or being in front of people, and doing that because. Well, first of all, it's a lot easier than sitting down writing and drawing. It's much quicker, although you do need to do your prep for it. But when you're chatting to people, I think that's when, particularly with the engineers, you don't see spoken to quite so often. I think they actually like being spoken to, and just seeing them coming out with stuff. And I'm learning, the audience are learning, and that's probably the one thing. If I could do only one thing, it would just be live TV stuff. Talk to people.
Man, that's fantastic. And let's talk about this upcoming season. What is your outlook on it? Who's going to surprise you the most? What are you looking to the cars and the regulations?
Well, I think last year there was a lot of expectation on the season because of the big rule changes, and everyone was saying that the cars are going to be able to overtake easier. And I think it achieved that, but of course what you get is what they call field spread, is where that some teams did much better than others, and some teams that maybe weren't doing so well jumped up, like Haas, for example, and teams that were doing very well suddenly weren't doing quite so well, which you could probably say the same. At least for the most part of the season. I think this year you'll see something slightly different. Everyone's going to squeeze up a lot more closely, and because they've had a year to understand the regulations have changed ever so slightly over the winter, just to kind of equalise things a little bit more. And the cost cap, the aero testing cap, that's all going to squeeze the top teams and help the lower teams. And I think we're just going to end up with a season that's going to be super competitive, but now with cars that are easier to overtake. So it's kind of like we come into that perfect storm where the regulations are finally starting to deliver what we've been looking for decades.
Exactly. And in regards to Red Bull and their losing their time on testing, do you really think that's going to affect them? I know Red Bull says it, and the other teams are like, it's insignificant. It's
going to have a big impact. But I think it's not going to happen at first race. So Red Bull have had slightly restricted aero testing because they won the championships, but also, as you say, because of their penalty, they're down to, I think, about 65% of the maximum available aero testing. So they'll probably turn up with a car given the momentum they had last year, that's already fast. Whereas what you'll find is that Ferrari and Mercedes may make a sudden jump over the winter because they've got the problem solved in last season's car. And we'll start out with probably three teams very close. But Red Bull will struggle as the season goes on because they're more restricted in their aero testing, whereas Ferrari and Mercedes get that little bit extra time in the wind tunnel. Alpine and McLaren equally chasing up behind them. So I think the performance that you see in maybe the first third of this year will be very different to what you see in the last third of this year, and the bit in the middle could be anything.
The make or break.
So I don't think someone winning the first 5 races on the bounce is necessarily a sign that they're going to dominate the season, because things will change as the year progresses, and equally as we go into 2024, which seems very early to be talking about already, but this will have an impact going on over the next couple of years.
Right. And I mean, I guess that's even like last year, right, where Ferrari had such a hot start, and I think reliability was such a big issue for Red Bull, but then, the season kind of went like this for Ferrari, and then just, oh my God, like the second half. I mean, how do you judge a team's like performance and upgrades throughout a season? Like, can you detect whether or not a team is not on the ball when it comes to the upgrades they're bringing out for a weekend, for example?
Yeah, I mean, there's various ways that you can have a look at that. First of all is how many little bits and pieces, or how often they actually bring a big update to the car. And as we saw last year, I mean, Ferrari in particular cut out their development very early, so we weren't seeing Ferrari updates. Equally, Red Bull brought lots of big changes quite early in the season. And then equally ran out of momentum. So you kind of keep your eye. The other thing is that when they bring something new and it disappears after just one run or one race weekend, that shows that they haven't got what we call the correlation, which is their design and simulation predicts the car will do this, but when you physically put it on the track, it doesn't do what they expect it, so you lack correlation. And so often teams will have that, and you'll find developments that just come and go, and it's like they're having problems, and then that will then pan out through the year. But equally, now that we're into this budget cap and the aero testing restriction, that you can't have a team bring big updates for the first half of the year, and then keep that up through the second half of the year. You know, this is something we've never seen before. Previously, if Ferrari, Red Bull, or Mercedes, who've got, you know, kind of not infinite budgets, but if they need to spend it, they'll spend it to win a championship. They can't do this now, and they couldn't do it last year. We're starting to learn, you know, the signals about what was going on, and I imagine as we get into the middle of the year, there'll be lots of talk about people being over budget, and you know, the aero testing restrictions really starting to bite for the teams at the front, whereas the teams at the bottom of the grid get so much more wind tunnel testing. But equally now, the teams at the bottom of the grid have the money to do that aero testing. Previously, you know, Haas and Williams were never actually able to use all their allocation of testing in the wind tunnel because they didn't have the money to fund it. Now they do. So you can suddenly see that, you know, this field is going to mix up, and we've got to keep our eye on how these developments are coming out through the year. So yeah, it's, you know, it's but careful this year you don't jump on a hype train too early. Because that train could stop at the station and not carry on to the end of the line. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting season to follow, and I think we will make some mistakes in trying to predict these things.
And how do you analyze driver performance? Whether, like, what are the things you consider when you are reporting and where you are writing, or even on TV? What do you look for in these performances?
The interesting thing is that you know, I don't really report on the drivers. So my interest in the drivers is kind of purely academic for my own purposes. I don't tend to kind of talk about it too much. There's people that really specialize in that. But still, you know, I'm a fan. I'm watching the sport. You know, I don't have favourites. So you watch a driver, and particularly not so much when the drivers are at the front, because, you know, when you're in a big team and you've got a car that can get pole or the car that can win, you know, your performance really becomes hyped by people because, you know, everything's there for you. So I tend to look at the drivers in the midfield and at the bottom of the grid, and looking out for the ones that are consistent, you know, will suddenly come up during a qualifying session and put that lap in, or in tricky conditions, which tends to be something that really separates the drivers as well. Someone that can actually put in a performance that steps above where their car should be. That's what catches my eye. And equally, you know, drivers that are very, very consistent. But I think it depends what you're looking for in a driver. I think sometimes we are looking for someone exciting. And, you know, maybe if I was a team manager, I'd be looking for someone a bit more consistent. But you know, it doesn't excite us as fans. And then, you know, equally, you know, I suppose you've got to look at the negative side of the drivers that don't seem to perform, that don't jump out, you know, in those situations that we spoke about for some drivers. And you think, you know, they're kind of here. Clearly, they're a good driver. But when you're comparing just 20 people, you know, there's always got to be someone that you think is, you know, is below. So I just tend to look for flash performances or lack of flash performances and judge them from there.
Is there, do you think there's a driver right now on the grid that can, you know, go from one car to another car and adapt like that instantly?
That's quite interesting, because I think a lot of people would think that, you know, there's some great drivers on the grid at the moment. You know, I think we've got some great young up and coming drivers. We've got, you know, a trio perhaps of absolutely world-class drivers at the front of the grid as well. But equally, when you look, you know, when I analyse them, I see that they do struggle when they go from car to car, or when the tyres aren't working in the way they want, the car's handling doesn't work. And there's not a driver at the moment that I feel can kind of outdrive their car in all conditions. And, you know, you tend to get a little bit of inconsistency in their performances because of that. So no one at the moment is jumping out for me. I think there are drivers in the past that are able to do that. And I think, you know, maybe one of the best ones was kind of Schumacher, that could, you know, engineer the car and his way of driving. I think a lot of the current drivers have a way of driving, have a way of getting the car set up, and obviously the car, you know, the car is so much of their performance as well. When the car isn't doing what they want, suddenly they're not looking quite so great. And I don't think we so often see drivers, you know, overcome that somehow. And we saw that certainly last year with some quite difficult cars that were, you know, tricky to drive in lots of different circumstances. And some drivers, you know, you can take someone like Daniel Ricciardo, we would all regard as potential world champion, a fantastic driver. Can't cope with something in these current cars, which is, you know, the way the McLaren works and the way that these new Pirelli tyres are working. So suddenly they're made to look, you know, not like a fool, but, you know, they're not able to express themselves. But I don't think there is anyone at the moment that really steps out to me as I can maximise that car in all conditions.
That's amazing.
And then for like some of the newer fans to the sport, I mean, I'd love for you even just to break down for us some of these terms that you hear, right? So even just breaking down something like, let's talk about like power unit optimization, right? Or if we have like energy management, what does that mean? And then how do you analyze that in a Formula One race?
Right. So, I mean, if we use the term power unit optimization, which sounds incredibly but it's no more different than you managing your telephone, your mobile phone, your cell phone. So with the Formula One power unit, you have the combustion engine, the V6 engine that burns the petrol. And you've only got 3 of them for the season, so you've got to make sure you don't wear them out. And you will wear that out either by doing lots of miles, or you'll wear it out quicker by using more power from it. Just like you do if you suddenly got some app on your phone, will start to burn your battery down really quickly or slow down your other apps. Then you've got the electrical side of the power unit, this double hybrid setup. And equally, you're restricted in how many components that you use, so you can't use them too much. In the race, you can't use your hybrid to build your battery level up too much because it makes everything really hot. When you get these things really hot, it decays their life. So again, you can run your battery on full screen, bright as you like, but at some point that screen's going to burn out. Just the same with these power units. So the driver, and I say it's the driver because they're the only ones that can really play with the switches on the steering wheel. The team can't do that from the pits. With the people on the pit wall, in the garage, all the people back at their HQ at base, and we're talking at that level, hundreds of people saying, right, at this point in the race, you've got the potential to grab 3rd position. So let's dial everything up, and we'll tell you the best way of dialing that up, depending on the circuit and the circumstances of the electrical side and the combustion side of your power units. You're kind of balancing all of that, but knowing that you can't just turn everything up to 10 for the rest of the race. Equally, if someone is already in that 3rd position, the person behind them is struggling and they're 10 seconds behind. It's like, right, let's start to dial everything back. Let's save some of that battery life. Let's save some of that combustion engine. And you just turn things down. And the drivers are constantly doing this. And even as you saw, I think it was Austria a couple of years ago when Norris was chasing a podium. And the engineer was telling him, corner by corner, what is the best setting for that power unit? The drivers don't normally do that, but to get the maximum performance out of everything that he had available, he had to change all of these modes every corner, which was fantastic to listen to. It's one of the things that really tells you what modern Formula One from a driver's point of view, from a technology point of view, is all about. So really, it's all about just managing those different lives for the situation that you're in. Because, as we know, and you see you get towards the end of the season, if you've burnt out all your power unit components, then you're going to get penalties. And you've got to pick and choose when that comes up. So power unit optimization, big term, basically, is just looking after your mobile phone.
And do you feel like we need to have maybe more supply of engine, like in terms of the regulation for each team? Because it seems like every team has to take a penalty. So isn't it just better to just maybe bump that number up from 3 to 4? And then make maybe more severe penalties for like 5 and 6. But it just seemed like there wasn't a team that went through last year that was fully able to get through the year with just 3.
Well, there were people that were able to do that through the year, and obviously some of the loss of them units is down to accidents, which is kind of outside of the driver's control. And I think there is maybe a regulation there. My personal opinion is, let's stick to just 3 power unit components per driver per year, and give them more draconian penalties if they start to do this kind of strategic swap out, which we saw a lot last year, even more so, particularly with Mercedes, in the back end of, what was that now? Losing track of the years, 2021. But, you've got the other point of view is like, let's just decide, what are we trying to do here? We're trying to cut costs. So one of these power units is a lot of money. And there's going to be some very different regulations coming up in the future. I think it's right that we restrict these power units, try and keep the costs down, trying to stop people just swapping them out, because otherwise it undermines the whole aim of what we're trying to do with, reducing costs and, the amount of material usage that Formula One goes through. So, from my point of view, three should last. Even with 25 races, it should last, which is incredible that they can do that, where, mid-2000s, they would fit an engine just for qualifying and then take it out and put another engine in, a brand new engine in for the race. It was madness. So I think we've got to a good situation, and the teams have learned massive amounts in the process.
And then what about aero and tire management? Can you define those for us as well? And then how do you analyze that during a race as well? Because I know on Twitter, it seems like every single person becomes a tire management pundit during a race.
They should have went with the media.
Yeah, I mean, time management is, that's a 5-hour podcast on its own.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a massive thing. Aero management tends to be a little bit more straightforward, and that tends to come with the bit that I like of the weekend. It's like the first few days of testing and practice.
Yep.
And you've got to decide how much downforce do you want to run. Now, obviously, you want downforce to go round the corners quickly, but the downside is the more downforce that you run, particularly with the wings, then the more drag you have, the slower you are on the straight. Now, some circuits, which we call peaky circuits, will only really want you to have big wings. So like Monaco, you couldn't run low downforce because there's no straights to make up the straight line speed advantage. Equally, Monza is the other extreme, where you don't want to run lots of downforce, you want high. And then there's lots of tracks in the middle, which you could get away with lots of downforce, a little amount of downforce.
Canada.
And you decide, and you decide then, what balance do we have? Now, typically, you would want a little bit more straight line speed for the race, but that will degrade your tyres quicker. Yeah. So you've got all of this practice on Friday and Saturday, understanding that wing level that you want to get to. Once qualifying starts, it's locked in. That's what we call parc fermé. You can't make changes without starting from the pit lane. So that's all over by then. But then, if the weather changes and tyres start to react differently, you could end up, either having tyres that don't get warm enough or get too hot because you're sliding. Tyre management in the race, even through qualifying, is a science all of its own. We had new tyres last year, so not only did we go to the big 18-inch wheels, but they were quite different tyres. We had much cooler temperatures coming out of the tyre blankets as well, whereas previously they could get almost ready to go straight out and run. Last year the temperatures were reduced. We think they're going to reduce again this year, but probably haven't confirmed that exactly how they'll do it this year. It may be not as draconian as we were expecting. So you've got to work out, how does the driver make the most of that tyre for the life they're expecting? So let's kind of jump into the race rather than qualifying. So how far do you want to stretch your stint? Do you want to be aggressive and use that tyre up? But then obviously you maybe need to make more pit stops, but maybe that will get you track position. So the whole balance is how hard you push the tyre. And I think a lot of people think that it's just about how fast the driver's going. But it's quite tricky because the way the tyres wear and the way the tyres get hot is quite different. So you would expect, out of a corner, everyone can make the rear tyres get really hot. But equally, the tyres can get really hot going into a corner. So if you imagine turning in really fast, you're kind of full Alonso, big steering. Not only the front tyres moving really hard, but suddenly the rear tyres are trying to resist the car just spinning. And that puts a lot of energy into the rear tyres and can really degrade them very quickly. So often it's the driver turning in more gently rather than being gentle on the throttle out of the corner that can affect the tyres. Equally, the front tyres, very hard to get hot. And it's very hard for the team to actually tune that now with the new regulations. So the driver's got to find ways of doing that. And then particularly coming out of pit stops, if you're coming onto a hard tyre, it's very hard to get them up to temperature. So there's a whole host of things that have to go. Lots of people will say, well, he should have just made that stint longer. If those tyres have given up, those tyres have given up. But equally, what we don't see is that, the precise gaps all the way back behind the car. We see some of it on the timing screens, but the team have got a much more complex view of this. And sometimes being out on a set of worn tyres just for a few more laps may actually be strategically better, even though it looks really bad from us fans is kind of pulling ahead. Put some sticky tyres on. But maybe that brings them out into a different spot in the traffic. Maybe that then works into their next stint that works better for them. So, none of us can predict it. The teams can't predict it. So us fans certainly can't. And it's just one of those things that, we all learn, particularly last year, we learn all the time about how teams are managing these new tyres. And to give you an example of that, is Mercedes. Now, we know they had lots of problems with their car last year, and, they never really got qualifying sussed out. However, in the race, regardless of where they were, you saw them catching everyone up because their tyre management, their understanding was so much better. And Lewis Hamilton, who is particularly fantastic at tyre management, and you could see George Russell was equally learning this from the coaching from the team in how to get these tyres to work through a race. By the end of the race, particularly towards the end of the year, it got them the win. It meant that they tended to finish in front of Ferrari, who didn't have a handle on tyre management. So you can see the importance of this. And, it's just one of those things. It's a bit like aero correlation. You've either got it or you haven't.
Yeah.
And, we'll just forever be puzzling over how it all works.
Yeah. And let's talk about the 2026 regulations. I know it's a big buzz, but like explain what that change is for, newer fans to F1, and then what your opinion is on it.
Okay, so we haven't seen all the 2026 regulations, but a little potted history. Historically, regulations were made up by people at the FIA in Paris, would kind of just make a knee-jerk reaction. I've got an idea, we're going to change this regulation, normally as a result of something that's happened.
Yeah.
And they weren't, these were just people making empirical ideas about what the rules should be. 2022 was the first time properly that Formula One actually equated a set of regulations with a set of aims, which was to help improve overtaking, to reduce costs, to make the grid more balanced. Yeah. And they actually did a full set of tests. They were doing, CFD and wind tunnel tests. They were doing all the simulations to make sure that these regulations did what the aims were aimed at. And I think that that's worked. So there's a whole, almost like a mini Formula One team at the FIA now looking at the regulations, which has never happened before, apart from a brief interlude in 2008, 2009, but I won't go into that now. 2026 is the second big update on that concept of regulation changes. So this is going to change lots of things. So it's going to change the chassis and it's going to change the power unit. Now, the chassis regulations haven't been announced yet, but the aims that we already know about, obviously, is to continue this lower cost, more equal, easy to overtake set of cars. But equally, they're going to be a little bit lighter. They'll be a little bit smaller, which again, everyone wants, if only from a visual perspective. So that's all going to come along in 2026, which is all fantastic. And I'm totally behind it. I don't think there's any negative sides to that at all. Then there's the new power unit regulations. So the power units have changed. The ones that we've got now go all the way back to 2014 and really haven't changed much during that period. 2026, we're going to get a new power unit, a new engine, a new hybrid system. So it's going to be a little bit more simplified. So the current engine's got 1,000 horsepower. The new engine is still going to have 1,000 horsepower, but half of it will come from the hybrid system, the electrical system. Half of it will come from the combustion system. The combustion system will run on fully sustainable fuel. So, carbon neutral fuel. And it's something I frankly don't understand, but that's what I'm told. And, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's how I understand it. So we're going to suddenly get these engines, which will probably be a little bit more difficult to drive, which must be a good thing. Surely, maybe not from a driver's point of view, but from us fans, you want to see the driver struggling. Because these cars just look so easy to drive. They really are. But they certainly look it. We're meeting this kind of sustainability thing. We're seeing new manufacturers coming in. So Audi are coming in. We've got Red Bull powertrains coming, making their first power unit. Honda will stay in, so we understand. And potentially some other people. So, GM with the Cadillac brand potentially could come in. And Ford badging on the Red Bull powertrains as well. So, all of these rules are worked out to be technically correct, but also kind of meet the wider needs of the sport. So, a lot of fans still want not noisy engines, but equally, we can't carry on as a sport if we're not shown to have some kind of, green credentials. Big manufacturers won't come in if they think that they've got to spend, hundreds of millions of pounds to develop, a completely pointless turbo layout. So, it's all kind of working together. And I think that will eventually then breed onto, the next big set of regulations, which could become really interesting, because by then the budget cap, the aero testing cap, the power unit development cap means that they can actually potentially free up some of the regulations to allow people to be a bit more innovative, a bit more imaginative. Audi could run a diesel, for example. Toyota could come in and have a, electric Formula One car or something. All within those caps, rather than within very specific technical regulations. So you can see that this is all kind of building up really nicely. And Formula One has never had that before. Not in my time, not in the years before I was in the sport. So we may have a few frustrations with some of these rule changes, but I think, the big picture is that Formula One's going in a really good direction.
And then, you mentioned obviously this, idea of obviously needing to catch up to the times, especially when it comes to the big movement around EV. I'm curious, I know Formula E exists, but is there a world where F1 becomes fully electric? Is that a world that you think is likely to happen, or not really?
I'd say yes, but I qualify that with a couple of things first. First of all, I think people look at Formula E and think, well, that is the electric Formula One. That is the electric single-seater series. It is kind of, but that's not. Formula E is a city centre electric racing thing. That's, you know, it's not going to come out to the big circuits. It's about bringing this technology to people that live in urban areas, so that they don't have to take thousands of cars up the motorway, you know, to a circuit in the middle of nowhere. People can come out, get their metro straight to the race circuit. That's what Formula E is about, and it can do that because it's electric. Formula One is about being the pinnacle of technology and of motorsport. And there's no reason it couldn't become electric. Now, obviously, there are technical barriers to that at the moment. You couldn't build a Formula One car that had a battery that would deliver 1,000 miles over a 200 miles per hour race. You know, that technology isn't there. There are some counter technologies, you know, fast charging, induction charging off the circuit, swappable batteries, all that sort of stuff could do.
Right.
I think the intermediate step that Formula One would make is to have what I describe as electric final drive, which is kind of like some of your hybrid road cars have. Most of the time, what's actually turning the wheels is the electric motor. But then you would have, you know, maybe a combustion engine, like you have with the Audi Dakar car, that is delivering energy to the electric final drive. And that could be, you know, mechanical engine because it's geared to it through a differential or what have you, or it could be because it's generating from another, you know, electric through a generator, like, you know, so the Audi Dakar car. Or you could have you know, a battery that you could swap, or you could have hydrogen, or you could have a diesel engine, a turbine engine. I think that's where Formula One needs to get to, this kind of semi-electric. The form of energy is immaterial, really.
Right.
You know, then that should be down to the manufacturers to come in and do, and there obviously needs to be ways that you manage that. But once you get into electrical powertrains, it becomes much easier to actually make sure that everyone's got an equal amount of torque that's coming out the back of the power unit and an equal amount of energy that's going into it. That's my vision of the future. And yeah, maybe at the end of the day, batteries win out. Maybe at the end of the day, hydrogen wins out. Maybe, you know, it's a complete failure and you end up having to, you know, run combustion engines. But I think that's where F1 should be. And I think that's really where the world's going with you know, your road cars and every other form of transport as well.
Right. And last few questions here in Q1, but one other thing I also see online a lot are a lot of people who watched F1 kind of from the late 90s, early 2000s. I mean, this is probably people like you as well. I'm curious, you know, if you ever hear the criticism, well, bring back the V10 engines. They sounded great. Or look at Lewis Hamilton do a 345 kilometer per hour lap in Suzuka, Japan. We'll never have that again because of just the weight of the cars, you know, the changes to the engine cooling systems, you know. What do you say to those people? Like, what, you know, do you think F1 is going to be as exciting for them because they've seen, obviously, you know, 2015, 2010, 2005, where these regulations have allowed the cars to be quicker generally?
I think you've got to be careful that a lot of people equate some of these super fast lap times back in the day to the V10 engine.
Right.
Because you had very different tyres, which frankly makes up most of the difference. The cars were lighter, but they had less power. They had a lot less technology, aero, electronics, gearbox. Yeah, there was lots of those cars that made them much slower than potentially would. If we could equalise these cars, you'd actually see that actually the current Formula One car is probably some of the best format. It's got 1,000 horsepower through the race, which really the V10s didn't. I mean, I go back to the 70s, so I can remember that the original turbo era, when everyone went on about how much BMW had 1,500 horsepower in qualifying. But that was for one qualifying lap, and that engine was literally thrown in the bin. You know, through the rest of the race, if the engine could make it to the end of the race, they had less than 1,000.
Right.
So suddenly we've got these super powerful cars, not just 1,000 peak horsepower, but huge amounts of torque, and you know, it's great aero. If you equalise it, these, you know, the engineers would pick these power units, but you know, there's other factors. See, these cars are heavy because of safety largely, because of the tyres largely, and again, that's all because of regulations, not because, you know, there's any, you know, aim to try and slow these cars down. We could make these cars faster, you know, if we wanted to, and that's probably part of where we need to get to. But I think a lot of people look at Formula One and they have this old-fashioned vision, you know, they need to be loud and they need to be burning petrol. You know, it's almost like you need to put testosterone in the fuel tank. Yeah, I personally don't get that view. You know, I'm not your average Formula One fan. I've got a particular niche that I'm interested in, but people do like the noise. And, I can kind of understand it, but, for me, that's not the enjoyment of the sport. So, yeah, I mean, I think Formula One does need to listen to that. But, yeah, I think a lot of people just want to go back, to the past. And, we simply can't do that. The world doesn't go back. But Formula One does need to hold on to some of its heritage, particularly with some of the old circuits and stuff like that. It would be a shame, as much as every modern fan hates Monaco.
Yep.
For me, as a historic fan,
Yeah.
It's got to be there.
Yep.
The same as maybe Silverstone or a French or a German Grand Prix.
Belgium.
Belgium.
Belgium,
We've
which
extended.
is one of the circuits, because I have to go and work there. I probably hate that one.
Yeah.
More, the
I heard
circuit's
that's
great,
nothing
but
there,
being there is terrible.
Yeah.
So Formula One needs to balance, being a heritage series, but equally being a series that is at the pinnacle of, everything that's involved with. So there's a balance, and some fans don't like that change. I can kind of understand that.
Yeah.
And you just have to let them moan.
Yeah.
And let they still watch anyway. So,
Yeah,
just let them carry on.
And in terms of reporting throughout your career, what have you found that works well for you? And, how do you differentiate between reporting and having your own opinion? And has that ever meshed together before?
No, I'm really lucky.
Yeah.
So I suppose you call me an engineer.
Yeah.
Some people may argue about that, but my point of view is I'm looking at the evidence and I'm giving it to you.
Yeah.
So, that rear wing worked or it didn't work. That tyre strategy worked or it didn't work. I think a lot of other journalists get involved in, the drivers, their personalities, their way of racing, who was responsible for that accident. Now, luckily, I don't have to report on that. That is just so
Polarizing.
it's
It really is.
and
Yeah.
it's subjective.
Yeah.
You can look at it from both directions. So I'm lucky. I don't tend to have to talk about stuff like that. But equally, I'm lucky in that I've never had a favourite driver or a favourite team. I'm not someone that goes around in, all papaya or, they call me being called a tifosi or a fanboy or something. Yeah, sport generally has never driven me in that direction. I've never been a fan of it. So I hope, and I think a lot of journalists also don't tend to have favourites. So you can be, you can put your opinion across, but without being polarised in one direction. And the way I know I'm getting that right was, like the Hamilton-Rosberg year. Half of the Hamilton fans were calling me a Rosberg. Fans were calling me a Hamilton. When I was
I win.
10 off, I think that happened. So I know that I must have it right if everyone's complaining or everyone is using my argument. And it's difficult. And some pundits, some people who do journalism have favourites. I think it's kind of unavoidable. I think there's people that you maybe have more respect for than you don't, or you have a relationship with more than others.
Yep.
And certain drivers, are able to kind of cultivate that in a different way to other drivers. But for me, it's everything really. I try and be as independent as I can and try not to. Particularly comes into things of legality. You can state them as you are, and sometimes you don't even have to kind of summarize it. So, is that wing cheating or is it just outside the rules? So it's like the cheating thing is subjective. So I can just say, look, the wing has got this. The rules say that. And take it from there. But it's tricky. And nowadays, particularly with social media, you do have to be careful with the comments that you make.
Yes.
So I've withdrawn from a lot of that sort of stuff nowadays.
Amazing. Well, that wraps up Q1. This has definitely been the most informative Q1.
Seriously, I learned so much.
I've learned a ton. Love this. How would you,
I
rank
think I'm
this?
going straight to the purple.
Purple?
Yeah,
That's tough. Henny
I don't give out
very
purples.
rarely gives purples
Yes,
in Q1.
That was very
I
cool.
see. We're going back to time management now. We don't want to peak too early.
Yeah.
Exactly, you see?
We come to Q3,
Clearly
set
haven't
to
learned
3,
that
and we've
much.
got no tyres.
Amazing. Well, stay tuned for Q2. That was Q1.
Perfect.
Welcome back to the Track Limits podcast. We're not going to get into Q2 with Craig Scarborough. Craig, you ready to go?
As I'll ever be, yes.
Purple first sector. Come on. Okay.
You got to match that now.
Getting right into it. Take us back, kind of the origin story for Craig. What did you study? Like, how did you become a journalist? Did you always want to do this growing up? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, really, the journalism was never in my mind at any point in my life. It ended up being a conduit to which I can do the thing that I really enjoy, which is engineering. And as a child, I wasn't the one out playing soccer and stuff like that or skateboarding. I was making model airplanes and stuff like that. I was into my books and that sort of thing. And that really kind of led me into engineering. I used to make the plastic model kits. Eventually, making an airplane just got a bit too easy. You kind of stick two wings together and you pilot in, and that's kind of the model done. So I looked for more complicated models, and the Formula One models, when you take the bodywork off, you had all the bits underneath. And from that, I learned how the car works. And, when you take that bit off, how does that work? So that kind of drove me. And, at school, I was kind of good at maths and sciences and stuff, but it was what was then called metalwork, which is probably now design and tech and what have you. That was the thing that I really got into. My teacher in that lesson said, well, why don't you go and study engineering? Which had never occurred to me. I didn't know about those things in those days. We're talking about, this is the mid-80s. It's a long time ago. So I went and studied engineering. Unfortunately, again, because of where we were in terms of where the UK was and the world was in those days, all the manufacturing companies that I applied to go and work for, Rolls-Royce, all the car companies, all the aircraft companies, ejector seat companies, they all stopped manufacturing in the UK within a short period after I was applying anyway. So I never got that job in engineering, but still had that massive interest. So I had cars and motorbikes that I enjoyed and stuff. And it was really only when the internet came along that suddenly there was an outlet where I could put content and where people could ask questions, which back then was kind of bulletin boards. And I worked in IT, and when you work in IT, as you guys obviously know, is that you can always look busy because you're always at your computer. Most of the time, frankly, by the time my day job career died in the sort of early 2010s, I did very little work and mainly F1 behind my desk. But it was that ability, people going, why is the Ferrari got these caked in brake drums? And it's like, well, I can explain that. And I can draw something for you to show what's going on. And obviously there was someone called Giorgio Piola who was doing this in magazines throughout the 70s and 80s, which kind of inspired me. That was, the part of the magazine I read first. And it just went from there. And as I said, I did some writing for a website, and then I got into a technical magazine, and then that led to doing paid work on a website, and that then went into video and webcasting and bits and pieces, and eventually TV, and it just kind of all built up. And along the way, I've improved my drawing, both my handwritten drawings, but also my digital drawings. I still can't do 3D. It's my biggest bugbear. Something that I need to apply myself to do. But that's the next thing. I've worked with lots of 3D artists, and they are fantastically skilled people, and it's really just kind of built up. And the great thing is, particularly with social media as well, I was one of the first of the journalists to start putting kind of free content out on social media during testing. So I don't know, again, you probably may not remember, but Renault one year came out, well, I think it was Lotus that year, had exhaust that came out the front of the side pods.
I seen a photo of it,
And we were all trying to find out where their exhausts were, which at that time was the big technical thing, because they were trying to blow the diffuser. And I kind of broke that story on social media and just I think went mad. And the great thing with social media is that you got direct interaction with all of the fans, that the new fans, the very technical fans, people within the sport. I'm often put right by people within the sport, or applauded by people within the sport for saying, you either got that right, or oh God, you've shown everyone our big secret. Thanks for that. And it's just really just kind of bubbled up from there. And now I'm in a privileged position for the past 10 or more years. This has been my day job, if you can call it a job.
And what type of education do you think, if someone wants to pursue the same career as you, do you think they need, or even what network they need to even be part of?
Well, I think the trouble is that, I've kind of fallen into this. This wasn't some grand design. It was just, I got luckier and luckier and luckier and positioned myself, and finally, I was able to do this. I think if you were to come in to do what I do now, you could come in with no skills whatsoever. You don't have to draw, because photography now is so good. You don't have to be a great photographer, because even I can take pictures of magazines with my phone.
We got 4K.
So, as long as you get to the car. most of it is spoken nowadays rather than the written word, so you don't have to be great at English. Equally, the engineering side, there's so many outlets now. You don't have to go and study engineering. You can learn from all the online resources. Nowadays, the only degrees that were around when I was studying were, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, or aeronautical. Nowadays, you can go and do some very specific degrees in motorsport, motorsport aerodynamics, race engineering, aspects of the design, which is great. So, that would be great if you could do that. The only thing I would say to anyone that's trying to do what I do, and this isn't from a protectionist point of view, is that it's a teeny tiny market. There aren't many other people out doing technical writing, not because they don't have the ability, because there just isn't the market for it.
Right.
So it's not going to make you a millionaire. But if you love it, go and do it, and you can do it purely as a hobby online, such as the wonders of TikTok and YouTube and
Twitter.
all of these other outlets now.
Podcasts.
Podcasts, those as well. But there is no need for you to be, a multiple degree, winning writer and engineer to do this. You don't have to have worked in the sport. I think the main thing, and this applies to anyone that either wants to work in journalism or actually directly in motorsport, is just go out and get stuck in. Which is all I ever did. I'd find an opportunity, or I'd push to get an opportunity and take it. And that, as with many things in life, that's what gets you moving forward.
And how long have you been full-time now for?
I think it was 2014 was my first full-time season, without having any form of day job to kind of get in the way of looking at football.
And then when you were doing it before part-time, that must have been crazy. Like full-time job and then come home in the evening. I'm guessing you're writing like, was there a work-life balance there, or were you just,
just go?
It was. It's difficult, especially because at the I started covering Formula 1 race by race in 2000. I've been a fan since the late 70s as a child. So I've kind of had a period where I was just a fan, and then actually curating content for people. The problem I had was that at one point when I was both had a day job, which was a fairly substantial job at that time, as well as a family. I was also writing for Autosport magazine, for Autosprint in Italy, and for doing work with a number of TV companies producing 3D content. So I would go to work, try and get as much work done as I can, while also doing F1 stuff. Oh, sorry about that. Come home, be a family man for a few hours, and then when everyone went to bed, I'd go and sit at my desk and I would draw race cars until 3, 4, 5 in the morning. Not every night, obviously. But over a Grand Prix weekend, ready for print deadlines and what have you. So and it was there was a work-life balance. There probably wasn't a work-life sleep balance through some of this, but I was kind of doing what I really loved. So it was tricky, but just so worthwhile, and I wouldn't have changed that for anything.
That's amazing. And other than being a potential engineer and a reporter, would you ever or have thought of being a driver before into F1?
I think probably where in my teens, yes. I would be a driver.
Did you kart? Were you like into karting?
No,
really?
not as a teenager. I did a little bit. The thing I realised, I was saying earlier that I never played soccer and tennis and golf, and I have no natural reflex coordination whatsoever. There's a reason that I'm looking at the engineering side, the sitting down part of it. No, I've got no ability in that respect, so I never realistically thought I could be a driver. I did apply to some of the Formula 1 teams as an engineer. Shortly after I finished my studies. Williams, I think it was Benetton as it was in those days, and a few other teams. When the teams were much, much smaller. And of course, they just saw me with my qualifications, but I had never... I didn't even know anyone else that was into Formula 1 when I was a teenager. I was the only person who'd turn up at school with Grand Prix magazines, Tamiya magazines for models and things. No one else, no one in my family, no one at school. So obviously I had no experience in motorsport, of engineering, mechanicking at all. So when they looked at my CV, it's like, well, no, we'll find the guy that's, has already... been karting or has been, mechanicking or, doing things. So I never made that step.
Right.
And maybe that's for the best, maybe not. I don't know.
Right.
But yeah, I never really harboured, and certainly nowadays, if an F1 team, God forbid, said, "Can you come and work for us?" I don't think I would want to do it, because I love this little niche that I've got, doing what I do.
And how do you evolve kind of like your content strategy? Because one of the things I know some people do is they see, a new platform pop up like TikTok, and they're like, oh, it's a fad. Or maybe like some people say, the smart people are like, I got to be on it. But some people are like, oh, it's a fad. It's not going to last. I don't want to be on it. People are dancing. This is weird. What the hell? Right?
Craig is out here dancing.
As I said, no coordination, no reflexes. I'm not going to be dancing.
For you though, like did you see some of these new platforms and get on them right away? Were you like early to like some of these new platforms? Were you very open to just putting out your content wherever?
Yeah, I think within Formula One, yes, I probably was. So, I started quite conventionally. I worked in IT, which kind of helped, and kind of I did my own website for a while, probably, old HTML coded. It's still out there somewhere. And then blogs came along. Now, the first time I got into blogs, it was sort of the Japanese journalist, and it was very much them taking a photo of their breakfast. I couldn't read or translate anything they were writing. And it's like, well, blogs are for people showing them, what their daily life's about, and that's no good. Then you saw a couple of other people do it, and I thought, So I started the Scarbstech F1 blog, which was great. It's offline now, unfortunately, because of technical problems that I just never got around to. And then Twitter came along, and again, you looked at it, and it was just lots of people that seemed to know each other going, hi. And it's like, well, this is useless. And then, I was probably one of the first people one of the early adopters of Twitter for putting content out rather than just chatting to other people within the sport. Because originally, Twitter would seem to me to be a very small sphere of people within the sport and the journalism bubble, and not so much about the fans. Obviously, it's changed over those years. TikTok's come along, and I do have a TikTok account.
Nice.
I've done no dancing. I've not really put any videos out. I kind of went on it to understand it.
Even to get ideas.
A lot of the people in the press room at Formula One would probably think TikTok is kids dancing, but there are some fantastic people on TikTok doing F1 content. And I can learn things. They can jump to the same conclusions that I have at the same time. And they've got a different way of communicating. It's a different audience. I don't think the TikTok audience is necessarily my audience. There are a lot of new fans, a lot of young fans, and I don't really produce the content to attract them. So I haven't really kind of got into it, but I certainly wouldn't discount anything. Like Twitch equally. It's another one of those big things. I think all these different platforms have all got a place, because there's no there shouldn't be a gatekeeper to Formula One. If you're a fan and you're a teenager and you just like drivers with blonde hair, great. If you're a weird guy in his 50s that only is interested in a little bend in carbon fibre on the floor of an F1 car, then I've got my space in F1 as well. There's space for all of us, and you can't discount anyone's point of view.
And do you think that will constantly change now that with DTS, Drive to Survive, and social media becoming such a pinnacle for F1? Do you think that your content will start to change to get those new audiences, or are you just going to stick to what you know and what works for you?
No, I mean, I think you've got to react to it. Drive to Survive has been such a massive part of Formula One. There's been documentaries in the past. Some of them are very good. Some of them are very technical, which is great for me. Drive to Survive. As I say, I never knew anyone that was into Formula One. All of a sudden now, I'm getting people come up to me that I've known for years going, "Oh yeah, I watch Formula One now. I watch Drive to Survive. My daughter watches it," and it's like, What? This was never happened without Drive to Survive. And it's fantastic. And yes, my content has had to change because I've had to explain some of the basics. So last year, particularly during the American Grand Prix, I put out a lot of more simple content. What's inside a Formula One car, drawn all the bits that you don't see. That's where the fuel tank is. That's where the extinguisher is. All that sort of stuff that people don't know. That haven't followed it, all of their life, and they've always had someone there to kind of explain it to them. So yeah, you do need to adapt. Whether I would ever be anyone that they'd want on Drive to Survive, or maybe there needs. We always joke there needs to be Netflix. A Design to Survive would be very niche. But there is space for all of it, and I think we've all got a responsibility to help other fans out so they can understand things.
And how do you? I know Henny loves Twitter, by the way. he loves getting a lot of his F1 news on Twitter. He follows a bunch of accounts, including yourself. I mean, how do you stay up to date with the sport? What do you read like in the morning? Is there a particular blog, magazine, video series that people should check out?
No, not really, actually. Right. I mean, I'm finding increasingly like the big major mainstream motorsport websites actually give almost no content worth reading whatsoever.
Right.
I hate to say that because I've worked for them in the past, but they just seem to be kind of just really putting a kind of clickbait title onto something that everybody else is following that's coming out from the teams anyway. So I'm lucky I can follow all the teams' press releases. I know people within the industry. But really Twitter is kind of like my go-to place. If you're into the technical side of the sport, there's a forum called f1technical.net or GP Technical, it might be called .net now, which has got lots of like-minded people posting about updates on the cars. There's people on TikTok that I can find out stuff. The team's TikToks. I often take screen grabs from the team's TikToks or their YouTubes because it's got a little clip of something in the background. I mean, actually, McLaren had some photos of who's their new driver this year? Is it Piastri?
Piastri.
I don't know the drivers. And in the background, there was their new turbo intercooler.
Oh wow!
I remember you zoomed in on it.
And it's like, I know about their new car. Those pictures got taken down. So I know that that's what it was. I kind of look everywhere. So I do spend an awful lot of time on my phone kind of scrolling around lots of different things, but there isn't one place. I think it would be, some mad, conglomerate of content if someone could put everything in one place. Well, I just kind of browse around everywhere. And, sometimes it could be something like, the LinkedIn network for businesses, people within the industry. And as I say, also you get people reach out to you. I'm an engineer, or my brother's cousin's son's dog is an engineer. So he told me this. You get all sorts of leads, and it's just a case of just listening out, and again, not being snobby about what platform you're looking at.
And in talks with just racing weekends, how does that go for you? There's a lot of traveling, but also there's so much chaos that's happening during the weekend. How do you process, capturing all the data that you need to report on it?
Race weekends get really difficult. For me, there's two types of race weekends. There's the ones where I'm at the race weekend, and then the ones where I'm not. And obviously, with the pandemic, I do a lot less races now than I've done in the past. A race weekend on the ground my work is very different to everybody else's. So I will always be there for the start of Thursday. Which for most people means nothing. If at the British Grand Prix, I come sometimes there on a Wednesday as well, because it's just really easy. When I'm up and down the pit lane looking at the cars, there's no point me sitting, in the media centre like a lot of journalists do. There's no point me doing track walks. I'm looking at the cars. Or I'm in the paddock, which again, I'm so privileged to have that access, chatting to people. Which could be other journalists, or it could be people within the teams or suppliers and something. So Thursday and Friday is all about just being around the cars as much as possible. And then oddly for me, once I've kind of done that, normally I've either posted my content, whether it's written or video or what have you. Saturday and Sunday kind of have less work importance for me. Clearly I need to watch the sessions, follow what's going on. But I've been to Grand Prix in the past where I've left on a Friday night, because what more, I can't get into the pit lane so much on a Saturday, because obviously there's so many sessions are going on Sunday, unless I had grid access, it's really hard to see the cars. So it's, I've got quite a different workflow to everyone else. If I'm not at a circuit, it's pretty much the same thing. And I'm like looking for, images from everybody, and it'll be looking at Twitter and TikTok and Facebook, and, often, VIP guests who, frankly, I have no interest in.
Well, I am.
I don't even know who half of them are. But they'll often be stood in the garage, having those pictures. But in the background of that picture, because it's not controlled by the PR people and the official photographers, there's something exposed that I can learn from. So it's not always just technical imagery. It's other bits and pieces and all those little videos and things, and just picking up on chit chat and story about what's going on over the weekend. But it tends to be quite full on. Probably all the way up to the Grand Prix, which is the only time, because I don't report on the action of the Grand Prix, and kind of relax, and I can watch it partly as a fan, but I've always got that kind of technical mind thinking, purple sector 1. That's not a good sign. And taking it on from there. But yeah, it's a lot of screen time. Yeah, there's a reason I've got massive.
Final question of Q2. You've mentioned that Belgium is obviously a Grand Prix that, as a journalist, very tough. It's tough for you. What's your favorite Grand Prix to attend as a journalist, and why?
There's lots of different reasons.
Yep.
There's probably a set of 3 classic ones, which I describe as as someone from Great Britain, the new world races.
Sure. Yeah.
So Canada.
Yep.
Australia, and Austin, which are all great race circuits. For being, actually there for the action on the track, great towns to be in as well. To really enjoy it. These aren't circuits that are out in the middle of nowhere. So I really enjoy those. I've got a soft spot for Monaco. It's just a lovely place to be in the French Riviera, being around the harbour. It's the pits are great because I can get so close to the car because there's no space. I really enjoy Hungary, and it's one of those things. I mean, it's a fantastic city, but again, a lot of people don't enjoy that race. But there's just something about being there that I really enjoy. And Singapore. I mean, if you had to do one race as a fan, I would say Singapore is the race that you've got to do because it's just spectacular in every respect. And but that is. Because the time difference for us Europeans, it's
tough.
It is tough.
Worse for us.
Canadians have it terrible.
But they're the classics.
Perfect.
Amazing.
Q2 verdict?
That was, I got to step it down a bit.
Yep.
I'm a green.
Gurple maybe? No.
Gurple? Maybe on the last one. We created a new one.
Green with a couple of mini sectors.
Little mini sectors where we say green and purple, mix it together, you got a Gurple,
Yeah. We've never done a Grello.
A Grello?
Yeah, like a yellow green.
Oh my God.
Anyways, well, stay tuned for Q3, guys. This should be a very exciting rapid fire round. Welcome back to the Track Limits podcast. We're getting into our favorite round now, the rapid fire round. Craig right now is sitting on a purple and a green. We'll see if he can get a final purple here, which would probably put you on provisional poll, I would hope.
From all our guests?
From all our guests, definitely. So, Craig, first question here, rapid full fire answers. If you had to choose one platform to post on forever, which one would it be?
That's easy, that's Twitter.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Craig, I'm about to show you a photo. I think everyone wants to know. We probably have talked about this, but this is your profile photo. What is it?
It's me. I mean, you got the big glasses and the square yellow head. It's me. That was actually done while I was at work for a major electrical company at the time on Paintbrush when I first set my Twitter account up. I think 2008 it might have been. And it's like, what should I use? What should I use? What should I use? I'll just do my face.
Wow.
And it's just stayed. And when people then first actually see me doing videos, it's like, oh it's you.
I love it.
Unreal. Which one would you delete out of the bigger social media platforms?
For me, Facebook. I'd never kind of got into it, and it seems to actually steal more content than any other platform. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's one that I never got on with. It works for some people.
Yep.
Perfect. Which driver would you trust to drive you blindfolded?
They're blindfolded.
The track.
Yeah.
They're blindfolded.
Do you know what? I really wouldn't care less. I would probably pick someone that was quite exciting, someone that really kind of throws the car around rather than someone that drove
smooth.
Beautifully. Who puts lots of someone like Grosjean, who's really kind of exciting. Perhaps Alonso, really throwing it into the corner in terms of someone that is still a current driver. I think I want to be, go on a full fairground ride rather than just being driven fast. It needs to be fun.
Great. Greatest driver of all time, in your opinion? I know you said you don't care about drivers, but...
Do you know what? For me,
I want to hear it.
There isn't one.
Okay.
There isn't a greatest driver of all time. I mean, you just can't... every era has got a number of drivers that are great, and I think we could say that about now and every other decade that I followed. For me, the only other driver that really kind of got me excited, which is when I was a teenager, was Gilles Villeneuve, and not simply because I'm a speaker.
Good answer.
Growing up and seeing his antics, and someone that just took the car to its absolute limit, or anything that he was on to the absolute limit every time. I think if he arrived in Formula One now, I would probably hate him. Like, you're a madman. You drive wheels and the wing bent over the car. But for me, that was probably the only driver that kind of excited me.
Yeah. Cool. We talked about this already, but what technical directive would you put in 2026 as a regulation change?
Well, I could get really kind of sort of into the nitty gritty and I'd throw some really good ones there, but no one would understand. But for me, I think the thing Formula One hasn't reintroduced is active suspension. And I think that would fit very well into the new regulations and is kind of a little bit overdue in terms of technology that F1 needs to have. There's other things that I think need there, particularly on the safety side of things. But again, I don't think that's probably quite so interesting. So yeah, active.
Cool. Great. Which F1 team would you pick if you were a driver? Which team would you want to drive for?
Well, I would pick the one that I'd predict as being best at the next season, rather than choosing a team because they're a team. I think there's still this mystique about Ferrari, isn't there? I think lots of drivers get kind of distracted to be drawn.
The legacy brand.
I don't know if that would work for me, but yeah, I mean, if it was me at the moment, if it was coming in, I'd choose Red Bull because I think they're the team in an ascendancy. But failing that, probably a Mercedes seat would be quite nice.
Cool.
Now that you are a driver, who would you want as a teammate on the current grid right now?
So I would want, again, depends which team I'm in. But I would guess I would probably want a driver that's quite slow, but has a lot of money. So there's a few out there, but not to be rude to anyone. But Lance Stroll.
Yeah, that's fair.
Hey, another Canadian.
We're just bringing up Canadians here.
We'll take it.
Who would you not want as your teammate, though?
The person that's quite the opposite, fast and doesn't bring money to the team. So, I wouldn't want to be up against Lewis Hamilton. I wouldn't want to be up against Max Verstappen either. And I think both of them for quite different reasons, both because of their personality and style, but also because of the team and the team management. I think both of them would be very hard to be up against. And you'd have to add Charles Leclerc to that list as well. I think it would be very hard to be a second Ferrari driver at the moment, even with my incredible driving skills that I've just been bestowed.
Of course.
Love that.
What's the most over-asked question that you get?
Why can't we go back to V12? V10s. That probably is that. That one followed by accusations of cheating is the other thing that it gets. But equally, I get a lot of very some broadly technical questions. Why is Williams the only team without the dashboard on the steering wheel, but on the that comes up as a major conversation topic about 12 times a year. I mean, it's unbelievable that people just keep asking the question. So I mean, that actually may even be the most asked question that I'm asked. Thinking about it,
amazing. That's crazy. Funniest social media comment you've ever gotten? Do you remember like one tweet that you got from a fan or something on Instagram you saw?
I don't know if I struggle to kind of pick out sort of top tens like that. But I think the thing that amazes me is, I have some fun on Twitter. I was having fun this morning with Williams in the Golf livery. And the ability for people on Twitter to come back with stuff that you just never expected. Either being funny or being incredibly serious. I can't think of many at the moment, but there's always someone that will just post a little funny on it. Just like, I wish I'd thought of that.
Like, damn. What's one piece of F1 memorabilia that you currently own or you would want to own?
Probably the thing, I mean, I've got, speaking to you guys off camera, I've got a massive collection of F1 pedals. So any more of them would be really nice. I've got, Red Bull and McLaren, and I'd like some Ferrari ones, but I don't think it's ever going to happen. Probably the most greatest piece of memorabilia, I've got a Red Bull F-duct. Which the person selling it didn't realise what it was. So I got it surprisingly cheap. It's actually going to be on show at the F1 exhibition that's coming up shortly.
Can I buy it
something. Well, I mean, you need to sell all your homes and your but you can certainly have it. One thing that I would really want, I think there's probably only a couple of things that I don't have. I haven't got a full monocoque survival cell. I haven't got space because it all goes up my attic.
So
that probably wouldn't fit through anyway. But something really vague is something called an inerter.
What's that?
Which is part of the suspension. So whereas, like normally you get a shock absorber, spring goes up and down, up and down. This was something introduced by McLaren and banned only last year, which has a little spinning weight on it. So as it goes in and out, it spins. And it helps manage the suspension. I haven't got one. I only know of one that came onto the market, and I know one that's in private hands. It's something, one of those things. It's one of those things. It's great because it's a beautiful piece of thing to look at. But when you actually demonstrate it, everyone just kind of gets it. So it's a bit, you know, kind of odd. But if I could get one of those, I think I'd be really happy.
Love that. Most embarrassing moment you've had in a Grand Prix weekend reporting? Is there one moment where you were like, oh man?
Probably lots, actually. Whether I realised it at the time or not. The one that I really remember, and this goes back a little while to the early 2000s, Williams, which were with BMW at the time, had big, quite lavish corporate launches with BMW. Williams, on the technical side, was still run by Patrick Head. Now, the people that know Patrick, he's kind of ex-British military. He's very stern, very serious. Not aggressive, but you certainly don't want to get in his bad side. He doesn't suffer fools lightly. They just finished the main, you know, we're doing this, we're doing that this year, and they said, right, we're now going to open the group, the people up to a conversation, so people were allowed up onto the stage to ask everyone questions. So of course I'm like, right, I'm going to get to Frank before all the other journalists do. Sorry, not Frank, to Patrick. And as in my rush, I actually tripped over the edge of the stage. And I kind of do that kind of running, slow in, I've got this. And I stopped just short of Patrick, and the look on his face looking back at me. And I was literally almost like, face to face.
Oh my God.
And it's like,
hello there.
So tell me about the keel design. He couldn't take me seriously after that. He was very kind and did give me time.
Is there a video of that? I would love to see.
There probably is on some B-reels somewhere at BMW in Munich, but I don't think, luckily this was kind of pre-video phones and stuff. No one captured that.
Next question. If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
That's it. For me, it's easy. Invisibility. Now, there's nothing that, for me, that would beat it. I could walk into garages. I can have a look around the car. I could go into the depot. I could go to the factories. It's like, how does he know this stuff? For me, that would be
there's just a tire just coming off.
Like,
what's happening?
And an inertia.
It's the third time this year the pedals. That for me, that would be absolutely fantastic. I'd love to fly or go back in time, but for me, the one that I could really make use of would be visibility.
Back in time to the V12 engine. I'm kidding. What celebrity would be a good fit for F1 in your opinion? Any celebrity, actor, actress, musician?
I don't know.
As a driver,
because I mean, the celebrities that are into F1 tend to be ones that aren't great on the celebrity scale, and vice versa. I think the character that needs to hang around Formula One, which isn't really a celebrity, is more of a he's an imaginary person with James Bond. He's just kind of hanging around. I know Daniel Craig has been to to Grand Prix, and as the previous Bonds have over the time as the actors. I just, that's, to me, what goes on kind of behind the scenes with all the big money and that. It's just sort of a James Bond. Maybe if he was a journalist as well, a few articles might be interesting.
Could drive the Aston Martin. You would hate that, but
Like that. All right, next question. It would be predictions. Let's talk about the next season. Well, with drivers and constructors.
The broad prediction, it's going to be a lot more competitive year this year. I think you're definitely going to see the top three big teams, as they were last year, fighting a lot closer. And each of them are going to have a stage in the season where they're better than the others. I think the midfield is going to be absolutely mad this year. And the question will be, could McLaren and Alpine make that leap into the regular podium finishers, top threes, which is a big ask, but it's possible. At the end of the year, it's really hard to predict who's going to be the Drivers' Championship, because you've got the car performance, you've got reliability, you've got engine penalties, you've got Red Bull going to be suffering with their decline in aero testing in the last half of the year.
Strategy.
I think if I had to pick one person that I would put my money on, and not because of any fan reasons, it'd probably be Verstappen as Drivers' Champion. He has less competition within his team. The team are completely behind him. They've got some momentum despite some of their issues they'll have this year. I don't think that means that Red Bull will get the Constructors' Championship. It's very much dependent on Sergio's performance. How he's allowed to perform, whether he stays in the seat for the whole year as well is another big question for this year. But I would see it's much more likely someone like Mercedes getting the Constructors' Championship. Two solid drivers, probably taking enough points away from each other in the Drivers' Championship not to quite get there. I think their team maybe a little while. They'll be a lot faster at the initial part of the year, but I don't think they would dominate maybe until perhaps the latter part of the year. And Ferrari kind of mixing in there would probably be, you know, sort of the third place amongst all of those. Yeah. So that's how I would expect it. But nothing would surprise me this year. You know, it could be a Perez Championship. Ferrari could get the Constructors. You know, it's fate will twist that last bit. But looking at it as logically as you possibly can, that's my prediction.
Fantastic. Can't wait for the season. You're writing an autobiography on your life. Which of these titles best resonates with you? All right. The Daredevil, the Dreamcatcher, the Free Spirit, the Hardest Worker.
Or the Invisible Man.
Or the Invisible Man.
I don't know if I want the Invisible Man as the title of my biography. I don't think any of them really kind of... probably Dreamcatcher, because I've always enjoyed this. And I had a day job, and I started to write a little bit, and I thought, oh, maybe I could get onto this next. Maybe I could get on TV and talk about this stuff, and it will pay my mortgage one day. And it has. So I'm living the dream. So I've got to be the Dreamcatcher.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Craig. The final question we ask every guest in about 30 seconds. Tell us how you want to be remembered. What sort of legacy do you want to leave behind? I think probably the only thing I want to be remembered by is the person that answered our questions to explain how a Formula One car works. Fantastic. That's all I ever strove to do. And you've done a great job of it so far, and I know you're going to continue to do that. Thank you for, again, coming on, sharing so much wisdom, so much expertise with us. Where can people find you on social media? So the best thing is Twitter, at scarbstech. But if you just put Scarbs and F1, you'll find. Even if you put Scrabs or Scabs in, that will works as well. But perfect. Awesome. scarbstech. We'll put the socials, guys, in the show description. Feel free to go and follow Craig, especially, again, if you are a newer fan coming into the sport and you want to take the next level, the next step up, go and follow Craig. He's an incredible person. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review. Check out our other episodes on tracklimitspod.com. Give us a follow on social media, and we'll see you in the next episode.